Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome back. I am excited to be kicking off the first of a series called Lunch with Alsace. So I'm going to go ahead and pin a comment. I have a very special guest that will be joining me today. I hope you can let me know what you are pairing with your Alsatian wines. Hello, there you are. I see you. Hello, Beth. Give me one moment. I'm just going to pin a comment. Hi, everyone. Oh, this is so exciting. What is everybody having for lunch today? And what are you pairing it with? Yes, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who's joining. Hi, Laura. Cheers, cheers. Hello, everybody. Very excited to be here. Hello, Olivier, you're here. Hello. Welcome.
Thank you.
9 a.m. It's 9 a.m. People are having lunch. Hello. Welcome. Hello, Olivier, and welcome to everybody for the first of a series of Lunch with Alsace. Look at everyone joining in. It's very exciting to see everybody. So we are joining for our first live chat, Lunch with Alsace. I am absolutely honored to kick off this series to promote Millésime Alsace and the Alsace AOC region in general. Today, I'm going to be chatting with Olivier Humbrecht, who is the general manager of Domaine Zind-Humbrecht. I'm sorry, is it Zind or Zind?
Zind.
Zind, okay, I apologize. Zind-Humbrecht. All right, so welcome. And for those of you who don't know, I'm trying to say hello to everybody. There's so much going on. For those of you who do not know, with a degree from the École supérieure d'agriculture de Purpin and the Université Oenologie de Toulouse in agriculture and oenology, respectively, Olivier earned his Master of Wine certification in not that old, in 1989. I'm a little dyslexic. My apologies. That is the second winemaker in the world to have obtained the Master of Wine certification. In the same year, 1989, Olivier took over as winemaker from his father, continuing an unbroken family lineage that has extended back to 1620. So now we're getting our numbers correct. And since 2002, Olivier has served as the president of the Syndicat International de Vignerons en Culture Biodynamique and Biodynamics. He also became the president of the Alsace Grand Cru Association in 2011. So everybody, a warm welcome to Olivier Humbrecht.
Thank you, Carrie. Hello, everyone. So that's my first live IG session. So be kind to me if it goes wrong at some stage.
Everyone's so happy that you're here. Everyone has probably seen all of the YouTube videos that you've done and are really excited to get more information from you. So we're very happy and excited to have you here. So let's kick off this lunch series.
Sure.
For those of you who are not overly familiar with Alsace, and I know a lot of you that are joining us are in fact familiar with Alsace, but Olivier, can you give us some just quick factoids about Alsace as a region?
Sure. So Alsace is in the northeast corner of France, tucked between the Rhine River, very close to the German border, and the Vosges Mountains. We are around the 48th parallel. So if you compare this to America, that's just slightly north of Seattle, going towards Canada in terms of latitude, to give you an idea. And it's 16,000 hectares, that's just under 40,000 acres. If you compare to Sancerre, we are 5 times bigger. But if you compare to Champagne, we're half the size of Champagne. So we're kind of in the middle, you know, not very small, but not very big. Yeah.
Okay. And can you tell everybody what's going to be happening in June with Millésime Alsace?
Yeah, so Millésime Alsace is an event which is organized every 2 years, and lots of people come from the whole world to taste the wines in a big fair. And obviously, this was not doable this year. So at the CIVA, they decided to go digital. And that means creating little sample packs that were sent to people around the world. There's roughly 100 wineries that are participating. So it's a bit like a fair, but except people will taste from home and be able to talk to the winegrowers, book slots on, video conference system and things like that. So we're doing our best to get connected with the rest of the world, even though we can't travel.
Yeah. So for some of you that are out there, you've already gotten a couple of these tasting kits, and that you can enjoy and taste at your leisure on your own. For other people, that this fair is going to be more interactive and more in live time for everyone to be able to join, and that's going to be in June. Let's talk a bit more about Zind-Humbrecht, since we have you and since you're the head guy over there. What can you tell us about your intense focus for the winery?
You mean mostly biodynamics, or?
Well, what makes Alsace such a great place to grow and to make wine?
Well, like Michel de Montaigne said in the 15th century, Alsace is a beautiful garden. And so you find nature is present everywhere. You get lots of different kind of crops. They're all very good, not just wine, but fruits and everything. It's also a place where you have a great gastronomy. It's lunch, so I hope those who are in the lunchtime time slot are having a good lunch at the moment. For me, it was done 6 hours before, So, but what makes Alsace special is a combination of really unique climate in France. Alsace is continental, semi-continental. We are protected by the Vosges Mountains from anything bad that can come from the west. That's mostly rain and wind and storms and things like that. And also, it's a very dry weather, so it's actually easier sometimes to grow grapes when you have less rain, creating disease and all this. We also have a hugely diversified geology in Alsace, which can be, it's good and complicated and complex, dare I say.
Why is that?
Because you will try to adapt different grape varieties to a specific place, looking at the climate and all that. And that means that sometimes you can also end up producing a lot of different wines. Different grape varieties, different style of wine, from bone dry to very sweet. So it's a challenge to understand all the wines from Alsace, but also the wines offer a great diversity. You can combine them with all sorts of different kind of food and different situations. So it's a great thing, but it's complicated to explain it. I hope I'll try to do it in a few minutes, but it'll be difficult.
Ready, go. Well, and that's 90% of the wines coming out of Alsace are in fact white, correct?
Yes, roughly 90%. The Pinot Noir, which is the only red grape in Alsace, used to be very small in production. It's increasing for two reasons. It's a grape variety that makes great red wines, as you all know, very popular, especially at the moment. But also, it's the climate change in Alsace, which is much warmer now than it used to be, is actually more favorable in some specific sites for the production of red wine. So the combination of the two makes it a very popular wine at the moment in the region.
Right. Well, and for those of you that don't know, there are just under 40,000 acres under vine in Alsace. Of that, about 12,000 are organic or converting to organic. That's about 1/3. So it is a tremendous amount of the wineries that are actually organic. And then of that, about 1,700 are biodynamic. So let's use that kind of as a springboard to talk a bit more about what's happening at Zind-Humbrecht with regards to biodynamics.
Yeah, we started in the early 90s trying to produce compost. We ended up realizing that the best compost was actually made by sourcing manure from biodynamic farms, and then we went further into the process, applying it on the compost itself, and then in the vineyard, and then in the cellar, in the wine. And we eventually were fully certified. We joined Biodivin in '98. I became the president later in 2003. So biodynamy in Alsace is an old history, because You know, with the proximity of Switzerland and Germany, it's something that came in our region also a lot. And also, I think Alsace is a very small region compared to other regions in France. And the proximity, that small area between the mountain and the Rhine River makes it that we also have to protect our environment. So I think all these put together explain why green and organic is quite strong in our area. Alsace is also an area where you find a lot of very small family estates. Mm-hmm. And I guess when you have this kind of structure, you know, there are a lot of very small producers, either producing grapes or making the wines. They are closer to their vineyards. They are inside their vineyards all the time, and they want to do it properly, you know, stay green, and all this is part of it. And today, you have to say, we are facing a lot of challenges, you know, like the climate change, hectic weather, the wine evolving in style and all that. And it's also a way of making wine that allows you to adapt better to all these challenges, you know.
And biodynamics is helping you to do that, correct?
Yes, yeah. Because our challenge is to harvest grapes, you know, which can ripen physiologically very well when you get problems with too much sunshine sometimes, and too much heat and too much drought. So you have to make the vines more resilient, you know, capable to survive in tougher, more complicated conditions. Overall, I would say the change of climate in Alsace was very, very positive, you know. In the past, my father and my grandfather would sometimes struggle in some years to get the grapes ripe, because it would be like today outside, you know, raining, cold, and challenging. When you get a bit more sunshine, especially during harvest time, it makes things much easier.
Right.
Know?
Of course. Well, there are two things that I want to ask you about with regards to the biodynamics and the farming and training vines to become essentially stronger, right? Mm-hmm. So I know in up in Rockpile in the AVA in Sonoma, they do a lot of dry farming because there's not a lot of water. There's not a lot of rain because it's getting closer to the cloud cover, but more so importantly, the vines can't get to water sources. They have troubles with that. Is that a factor in Alsace because of the Vosges Mountains, or are the vines more towards the valley and they don't have that problem?
In Alsace, the numbers are like this. We have the same rainfall that hasn't changed. It's about 20 inches of rain a year. But because we are continental, we get our maximum rainfall usually June, July, August, when the vines actually need it the most. Mm-hmm. And it might sound strange to a lot of people, but our driest month is usually February, March, where you can sometimes have no rain at all. So that is the contrary of the Mediterranean climate, which is super dry in summer and very wet in winter. And so for that, we are very, very lucky. And the little challenge we have is because you get more light, less clouds, more higher temperatures, the vine needs to perspire more, and that creates a small deficit, which we have to compensate by changing our, you know, the way we train the vines, how we protect the soil. Basically, 40 years ago, we tried to expose the vine and the grapes as much as possible to the sunshine. Today, we try to create more, you know, umbrella effect and shadow in the ground, doing mulching and things like that, to keep the moisture and the humidity. But if you do this well and the yields are adapted, water stress can be managed still by dry farming. You know, it might be challenging for some people because they have to change the way to cultivate, and I'm sure that's one of the reasons also why a lot of people go organic, is because the managing the water and the soil becomes more efficient in organic cultivation. You know.
Yeah. Well, and the second thought and question that I had is more along the lines of the biodynamics specifically. Now, in Bordeaux, you have a lot more humidity that's going to create mildew, and the processes of biodynamics are quite more difficult than not using biodynamics or not organic products in the vineyards. So you kind of have the opposite situation going on, in that it's more dry in Alsace, correct?
Yes, of course, but you know, I'd like to point out every wine region has its own problem, and that might be different. Right. Bordeaux knows the mildew harder than we do in Alsace, most probably, in some places at least, but we know oidium also. You know, that's the other one. If you don't have the mildew, you usually have the oidium, and the oidium is the disease of the good weather, if you want. You know? That's what happens when you get sunshine. So, and we also have other issues. So everything is doable in biodynamic, but you have to do it well. You know, it's not just a recipe. You have to make it work for your own place. And creating that favorable environment around the vine is very important, because at the end, you want to drink good wines, you know. You want the wine also to taste the taste of the place, you know, and these kind of things, you know.
Olivier, you should be on the PR company team for Odium.
No time.
All right, since we are limited on time, let's talk about the wine. So we have the same wines. Where do you want to start?
It might sound odd to you, but for a question of power, I would start with the Pinot Gris.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
So we have the Pinot Gris Roche Roulet.
Yeah.
This is 2017.
Mm.
You have it too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So 17 was a vintage that was, it's a beautiful year, but extremely complicated, because we had, you know, France got a massive hit by frost in 2020. Yeah. Alsace escaped it. We have a few vines that got cold, let's say, but I don't think there is a major damage in Alsace, really. We are okay, in fact. Yeah. But we had this in 17 big time. And in that vineyard, Pinot Gris Roche Roulet in 17, that was the less affected of our vineyard. Pinot Gris was more resistant to the frost. We lost about 30–40% of the crop. The consequence is a wine which is much more concentrated and richer than what you would usually expect for this cuvée. Roche Roulet means galets, rolling stones. So the soil is a very shallow, dry, well-drained galets, round stones, pebbles, fine sands, a bit of silt there and there. Very warm place. So when you drop the yield, which are already to start with very small, and you drop it for another 30%, you end up with something quite powerful, intense, and rich. So the wine is what I would call off-dry. It's just to the limit of being considered dry. It's just 9-point-something grams per liter sugar. But you have that very powerful mineral character of the 2017 vintage. The wines have a balanced acidity. I wouldn't call it high, neither low, just normal, but enhanced by super tannins and really great mineral concentration into the wine. That comes from
I'm definitely getting those ripe flavors on the nose, and then on the palate, it gets much more linear, and you get this weight to it, but it's a structured weight, which I always find is so fascinating in white wines, because we always think about it that way with red wines, and we rarely talk about that with a Pinot Gris, for example. But this one definitely has weight, and it's definitely got structure, and it's a gorgeous, gorgeous wine.
Pinot Gris in Alsace is quite different from most Pinot Gris around the world. The two biggest styles of Pinot Gris you can find around the world outside of Alsace is something either made like in Burgundy, you know, with oak barrel age and small barrels. So it looks more like a kind of a more fruity Chardonnay, if you want. And then you have the other version, which comes mostly from Italy, which is a much lighter, less alcohol, drier style. And Alsace is a third type that you can find. It's usually a wine that has quite a lot of weight. That can be from anything from bone dry to sometimes quite sweet. So it's important to check the richness. Here we are just off dry, but with a lot of weight and structure, so it doesn't taste really that sweet. And when Pinot Gris is very ripe, you start to get all these white fruit aromatics, a little bit of honey, you know, apricot, things like that. Yeah. Which is usually lovely. And then the wine can take a really beautiful, darker color, which is also maybe the sign of our vinification. You know, the wine is aged on the lees until bottling time for a year or a year and a half. This one was for a whole year. So that also adds up to the color. And something which is a lot of people start to do more and more in Alsace, is to press whole cluster for a longer time, creates a little maceration also. And Pinot Gris is actually quite a dark color grape, surprisingly dark. Not as blue dark as Pinot Noir, but not far from it. You know, it's more like a gray dark color. So when you work like this, you can end up sometimes with quite strong color into the wine, which is totally natural.
Yeah. All right, what's the next one?
So the next one is the Gewürztraminer Roche Roulet from the same Vignette, 2017, which is this is the Vignette where, I don't know if you looked at our tasting sheets, but to give you an idea, it took half a team, half a harvest team, so about 30, 35 people instead of 60, 70, to harvest 7 hectares. That's roughly 18, 19 acres in 3 hours. And usually we do this surface in about 3 days. The Gewürztraminer, I knew it's a grape which is fragile to cold. It likes warmth and sunshine, but I didn't realize it'd be so fragile in regards to frost, because we never had a frost like this in Alsace before. And basically all the primary birds were cooked April 21. They were about big like this, like they are today in 21. And only secondary birds grew back later, carrying tiny, tiny little, grappillons with just a few berries in it. So we only had like 6 hectoliter hectare. Everything was put together, the 7 hectares, and we produced something like 5,000 bottles from 18, 19 acres of vineyard. Hence the super rich concentration of the wine. It's usually a bit like the Pinot Gris wine that should be a little bit less in power.
On the palate.
Yeah, it's a massive wine.
I feel like the Gewürztraminer is the quintessential aromatic wine. You're absolutely right about it being less weighty than the Pinot Gris, but the aromatics are just in your face, and it's so pretty and so beautiful. It's like sticking your face in a bunch of flowers. It's so pretty. It's so beautiful. But then it's more linear and a little less structured than the Pinot Gris, a little bit lighter than the Pinot Gris, but it's got so much aromatics on it.
When you say lighter, I'm not going to tell you the alcohol of this wine, but let's say that if you drink the whole bottle, you'd be more than merry. You know what I mean?
What my mom used to call happy. We'll be happy.
Okay, happy, not merry. The one thing which is unusual about this wine, because usually Gewürztraminer harvested with a quite rich potential, ends up with some sweetness. This one, for some reason, which and that's one of the beauty of biodynamics. You let the wine ferment on its own. You don't add yeast and stuff like that, and you don't try to control the wine. And usually, when a wine has less acidity and more tannins, which is the case of the Gewürztraminer, fermentation goes further. And this one is bone dry. It's got no sugar at all. Yep. So in terms of food comparison, as much as the first Pinot Gris, I would have said, for my taste, like duck, the ventrèche de porc, pork belly and things like that, grilled when you have some caramelization, goes very well. But for the Gewürztraminer here, being so dry, I would go really for the full spice, curry and things like this, or cheese or something like that. Yeah.
So I have lunch because it's lunchtime.
Okay. Yeah.
So I have sashimi, slightly seared tuna.
That should do well, yeah.
With a little bit of tobiko, a little bit of scallion, and a little bit of spice.
Bon appétit. So it's the same soil as a Pinot Gris Roche Roulet, except we plant the Gewürztraminer on where you find the bigger rocks, and the Pinot Gris, and we also have some Riesling in that vineyard, by the way. These are planted where you have more fine silt and smaller, sandy soil. The Gewürz really wants warmth and heat. It's a grape variety that can be problematic in vintages when you get a lousy 2 or 3 weeks before harvest. Gewürz really enjoys sunshine. I always say as a joke, it's a bit of it's a funny grape variety because it's more a red wine than a white wine.
Okay.
It has the tannins of a red wine, but it looks white and sometimes sweet. That's the difference with the red. But except that, whatever quality you're looking for a red wine, you should find it in a Gewürztraminer, you know.
Got it. There's a question here. What's the earliest ripening variety?
Okay, interesting. The first one to bud break is Gewürztraminer. And the last one is usually Riesling, Pinot Gris being in the middle. But in terms of harvest, Gewürztraminer is the last one. It's a grape that usually the first one we always start with the Pinot Gris Roche-Rouet. That's the first wine we pick every harvest. Then we go to the Rieslings, and eventually we finish with the Gewürztraminers. And usually the Gewürz is harvested almost 3-4 weeks the Roche-Roulet after the Pinot Gris Roche-Rouet. It takes much more time to ripen. It's a big grapes like Mourvèdre, Grenache in the south of France compared to something like Syrah or Cabernet. They take so much longer to ripen properly. You know?
And is that the same with the flowering? So you were talking about the bud breaks, and then when you're picking the grapes, do they flower the same way?
Strangely enough, the Pinot Gris might be the first one you see the first flowers, even though it bud breaks slightly after the Gewürz. And that difference gets bigger and bigger as you get closer to the change of color, the veraison. Pinot Gris can also be again a week or so earlier. And at harvest time, but also you must remember we harvest the Gewürz later because we look for more power and richness into the wine. You know, you could maybe harvest a little bit earlier if you try to make a slightly more delicate wine, which works in some vintages, but that was not possible in 17. The crop was too small, 6 hectare. You're talking like a quarter of a ton per acre of grapes. You know.
Right. So interestingly enough, I tasted the Pinot Gris after also having the Tuna, and I think the Pinot Gris with that spice, the Pinot Gris was a little more rich and able to handle the pairing better, where the spice overpowered the Gewürztraminer, surprisingly.
Yeah.
I decided to go with sushi because one of my first experiences with Alsatian wine was when I was the beverage manager at Vong Restaurant for Jean-Georges von Grichten, who is Alsatian. And we had all these Alsatian wines, and I was introduced to all of these different Thai flavors that I had never experienced before. And they go so well with the earthiness and the spice qualities that you get in some of the different peppers and different types of spices that you don't always see here in America. We're starting to get them more and more, but it's hard to find here. So it's really fascinating to see what different flavors do to the two different wines.
Yeah, absolutely. People are frightened of sometimes a little bit of sweetness into wines, but the more the spice you have, the more you have to go towards a bit of sweetness into the wine, and it's not at all a problem. For me, the 2017, which I haven't tried for a long time because we out of stock for years now of this wine, is for me. I would go more for Creole cuisine, Mexican type cuisine, you know, ribs. Things like that, something smoky. In Alsace, we have a lot of pork, but we smoke a lot the food, and that the smoky flavor in Gewürz is something also that goes very, very well.
I just made a mole last night. I'm wondering if I have some leftovers. I'm wondering if that Gewürztraminer will go really nicely with those leftovers of the pork mole.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go to the third wine that we have.
It's a Riesling.
Yes, indeed it is. This wine is gorgeous. Gorgeous.
So we are the order of tasting is here from I would say goes towards the most complex. When you purely look just at the structure on the palate, it's probably the wine you would think of drinking first in a meal. You know, you would first maybe serve this to a lighter seafood dish. I'll send you all the recipes we did in the past with some restaurant when I kept the menus, and they all make me quite salivate when I look at it. But it's mostly based around fish. Okay.
I'm going to taste a couple of things while you talk about this wine. Don't mind me.
No problem. So the Rangen Vignette is one of the 51 Grand Crus in Alsace. and it's the one which is the most southerly located in the region. And as you go south in the region, you go up the Rhine River, so the altitude goes up. So the vineyard is quite high in altitude, between 350 and 480 meters. That's roughly in feet between 1,100 and something like almost 1,500 feet elevation. Yeah. It's pretty high in altitude, in a very tight valley, not very deep, very close to the highest mountains in Alsace. So it's a very fresh area, which enjoys also more rainfalls. In comparison, Tun, where the Rhinen is roughly 800-900 millimeters a year compared to 500 in Turkheim. So it's almost double. And it needs it because the soil is basically made of just big, chunky, broken volcanic sedimentary rocks. We call it groac in French. It's sedimented ash from a volcano that was in the south of Alsace that eventually got compacted into this very, very hard rock. You can almost compare it to basalt, except it's much heavier and darker and contains even more minerals. Minerals that give all that really, really typical and unique taste to this wine. It's very smoky, flinty. You have almost the volcano shouting into your nose. 17 is beautifully concentrated. It's a dry wine, but with a lot of length and power on the palate. Yeah, it's a very, very classic dry Riesling. And the character of that vineyard is also, you know, today it's very fashionable to talk about minerality and savory quality and how the wine makes you salivate or not and all this. But if there is one wine where you can really feel this very easily, it's the Rhinen Riesling. You have that salivation on the back of the palate when you drink the wine, and you can really taste the salt into it, which is a general characteristic of great volcanic vineyards, usually.
Right. Yeah. Well, this wine, and I'm hesitant to use this word because we've used it in the past, but I feel like in the last couple of years, the word has changed, altered. Some of you may know what I'm talking about. This wine to me is so clean and fresh, just the pure expression of that minerality of the grape itself. You get all of the characteristics, a little bit of that petrol, some of those free fruits that are absolutely gorgeous, but they're not cloying, they're not too heavy. Let's not go into what that word means otherwise right now, but which is cool because we're actually talking about a real biodynamic wine. So this to me went stunningly because of that salinity. It went stunningly with yellowtail with scallion.
Okay, yeah. I see. In all the recipes I keep that goes well with a wine like this, a third of them are almost Japanese kind of cuisine, you see. So a mixture of a lot of raw fish or barely cooked with delicate spices, not something that overpowers you like you find maybe sometimes in Thai cuisine or something like that.
Sure.
It's Thai cuisine, Indian cuisine doesn't go well with Riesling. It kills it. It needs to be more subtle and delicate. Yeah. So
okay, that's interesting because I've always learned, well, maybe a little more like a Trockenberg Alsace might go better with.
Yeah, okay. If you go to Vendange Tardive or Selection de Grenoble, or with a certain, botrytis presence and richness, then it's totally different. I'm talking about dry Riesling. And today there is a very, very, very strong and clear determination in the region, which surprises me that today you can say 99.9% of the Riesling produced in Alsace are dry wines,
Yeah.
Obviously, you can find Vendange Tardive, late harvest style, which are anything from medium to very sweet. But when you go to the Alsace wines, the Lieu-dit wines, Grand Cru wines, it's very, very rare to find one which is just a little bit of dry.
So, and Stephanie's talking about Thai cuisine with the Gewürztraminer. I think, again, it's going to have not so much of a dryness to it. It's going to have a bit more of the, the ripeness on the grapes in order to get that weight to the wine, in order to balance the spice in cuisine.
I forgot all the name of the spices they use in the Thai. You also have cocoa milk, you have ginger and this...
Galangal.
You call it in English, not mint, but one of these green leaves, you know, that look like mint, which is very, very strong.
By basil, or I mean, there is mint used in there.
Lemony, yeah, and you need a gewürz, but you need some sweetness to it. You know, you need an almost vendange tardive style with a bit less alcohol and more sweetness, and then it's absolutely magical. Yeah.
Yeah. And then what about all of those grown cru dry Rieslings with Alsatian cheese?
Alsatian cheese. I would go, well, we have one AOC in Alsace, that's the Münster. And a proper Münster is a kind of cheese that you can smell from a certain distance.
Yeah.
You know, I once brought some in a vacuum pack at the airport, and the custom officer really wanted me to open the packet in front of him. And he told me, "You dirty French, how can you eat this? Go away." And true story. Yeah.
That's really funny. I have a story like that. I was flying from San Francisco back to New York, and a couple of friends of mine stopped in Cowgirl Creamery, and we picked up some Morbier, and we opened it on the plane, and the gentleman sitting next to us went, "Oh!"
So with a Münster like this, you need a rich Gewürztraminer. You know, you need something like that, almost going to vendange tardive even. But we also produce locally more and more. They're not AOCs, but there are a lot of sheep farms and goats farms that make much more delicate, fresher style white goat cheese. And that's a kind of cheese, sometimes even with herbs, you know, parsley or something like that. That's the kind of cheese that goes well with a dry Riesling. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Oh, just talking about food and wine is so wonderful. I'm excited to get more into these wines and more into my sushi. We're kind of past the time that we were going to talk, but I want to get some more information from you. How are you going to be participating in Millésime Alsace?
So on the website of Millésime Alsace, which is quite easy to find if you Google it, you can take appointments with all the growers participating. Please be kind with the growers, because I could see some people sending me appointments for 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning or something like that. I know that with the time difference, sometimes it's difficult to make it work, but it's over 3 days. You take an appointment. You can keep your little box of samples to taste with me or whoever you want to contact, or just chat, ask questions. It's a bit like if you go to a fair, you talk to the person one-to-one. It's not like you are multiple people into the room. It's just whoever connects, and with the growers, they choose. Yeah.
Ah, very cool. All right. There's one more question that we'll take before we sign off. There's a question about recent vintages. Were you protected by Vosges? No, not so much 2020, but a little bit more back than that, maybe 17, 18, 19.
17, 18, you're asking me? No.
Yeah. Well, we just talked about 17, so maybe 18.
Oh, okay. I thought you said 1718 vintage. I don't know about this one.
1869.
I can tell you about 1251, because apparently the Rangen made very good wine in 1251. But no, okay. Alsace is usually quite regular in terms of quality. Sometimes the factor that makes it change could be the size of the crop, whether we have a drought or not during summer or something like that. But basically, the last complicated vintage we had probably was 2014, where we had the Asian fruit fly issues at the train in New York. And in 13, we had some hail in part of Alsace. 17, the frost. But in terms of quality, 13, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, they're still fermenting the cellar. I don't dare say something like that. It's also like a good vintage. Really, it's in terms of style, I would say 18 and 17, very clean wines, no botrytis, less of a sweeter style. 19, extremely precise, great acidity, fantastic year, especially for the drier Riesling type of wines, or Pinot Gris. 15 is a big vintage, lots of sunshine, but also water in summer, so lots of richness. That's probably the vintage where you'll find more of the vendange tardif style among some producers or something like that.
Yeah.
But no, honestly, I can't complain. If I complain about one vintage, it's 2017, because I didn't have enough wine to make. But in terms of quality, they're good. Yeah.
No, I mean, we have them here with us today. They're excellent. They're not just good, they're excellent.
Thank you.
All right, very cool. So I want to talk just briefly more about the Millésime Alsace. There are going to be webinars that will be announced, and that will be on the website too. Olivier, I want to thank you for joining me for lunch. This has been really fun and very enlightening. It's been very delicious as well. Like I said, your wines are beautiful. I can't wait to taste more of them. I'm going to need to find out where to get them in Pennsylvania. I know where to get them in New York, but I need to get them here in Pennsylvania. Thank you everybody else for joining us as well. I hope you're having a great week, and I hope you're enjoying a glass of not just Alsatian wine, but of Zind-Humbrecht.
Thank you. Cheers to you.
Please be sure to watch Lunch with Alsace next Monday, again at noon. Take some time to check out the very interactive website. It's Millésime, that's MILLESIMES Alsace, and also make sure that you're following Drink Alsace on Instagram. I hope everyone has a fantastic week. Olivier, I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for sharing with us, and we look forward to seeing you online again with Millésime Alsace.
I've got a bottle of Riesling Rangen 17 to finish tonight, so it's going to be a good night.
Fantastic. Cheers to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Cheers. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.